Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to global context. Today, we're unpacking a stack of sources that really highlights a fundamental tension, this global fight for survival.
Yeah, whether that's survival of ancient knowledge against the elements or literally millions of people fighting for aid and safety.
Exactly. So we've distilled four powerful themes: the fragility of cultural heritage, the immense human cost of conflicts today, some serious questions about institutional integrity.
Right. And maybe surprisingly, a moment of really cool technological innovation.
Our goal here is to connect these dots for you, these seemingly separate global pressures, into one coherent picture.
Make sense of the connections.
And just to give you a sense of the range, we'll start in Mauritania with a place called the Sudan of the desert that's literally, well, drowning in sand.
And we'll wrap up with a 16-year-old robotics genius.
Who built an advanced robotic hand entirely out of Legos. Quite the journey. Let's get started. Okay, first stop. Chinguetti, Mauritania. It's got these incredible names: City of Libraries, Seventh Holy City of Islam.
And it really was a major center. Historically, I mean, it popped up in the 13th century, a fortified settlement, a SAR, vital for those trans-Saharan trade routes.
So a crossroads for trade, but also for knowledge.
Absolutely. It became a huge hub for Maghreb pilgrims going to Mecca, and over time developed into this major center for Islamic scholarship, but also scientific learning. We're talking texts going back to the later Middle Ages, some even from the 11th century.
Which is incredible, but the threat now isn't, some abstract decline. It's physical, it's sand.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of Mauritania is desert or semi-desert. That's the backdrop.
And desertification is accelerating across the whole Sahel region. The sources say the dunes are already pushing up to the windows of some buildings in Chinguetti.
You can picture it. And it requires this constant human effort just to hold back the tide.
Which brings us to the custodians. People like Saif Islam, who's 67, he actually left the civil service, came back in 2015 specifically to fight for these manuscripts.
He runs the Ahmed Mahmoud Library Foundation. It's one of only 2 libraries there still open to the public.
And he made this really striking comment mentioned in the sources. He said, Europeans are more interested in Chinguetti than Arabs or even Mauritanian officials.
Oof, yeah.
What does that tell you, about where the value is placed, or maybe where the political will isn't, if a UNESCO World Heritage Site can't seem to secure enough support?
It points straight to that funding paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
UNESCO status was granted back in '96, but it hasn't really translated into the kind of sustained funding needed on the ground.
And tourism just collapsed.
Completely.
Yeah.
From hundreds of visitors daily before COVID and the instability in neighboring Mali, now it's barely 200 visitors per season.
Wow.
So the economic incentive to preserve those remaining 12 family-run libraries holding, over 2,000 volumes, it evaporates.
And these aren't just Qurans, right? It's astronomy, math, medicine.
Poetry, legal texts, a whole spectrum of knowledge.
There's a nonprofit, Terrachidia, doing restoration work.
Yeah, based in Madrid. And their co-founder, Mamen Moreno, she said something crucial. Cities, like houses, they're preserved when they're inhabited. You need life, you need activity.
Makes sense. Preservation isn't just about walls, it's about the life inside them. Okay, that's a slow, quiet kind of destruction, neglect, apathy, the environment.
But now we need to pivot quite dramatically.
Yeah, to the immediate catastrophic cost of active conflict, where global apathy isn't slow, it's, deadly right now.
And we have to start with Sudan. The scale there is just immense. 12 million people displaced since the civil war broke out in April 2023.
Between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary RSF.
Right. And the RSF recently took El Fasher, which basically gives them control over most of Darfur. It feels horrifyingly familiar.
That's exactly what UN diplomat Tom Fletcher highlighted. He spoke to the UN Security Council recently, and he lamented what he called a global crisis of apathy.
Strong words.
He directly compared the current lack of response to the international focus on the Darfur genocide 20 years ago. He suggested there's almost a sense of resignation now.
And that resignation, that apathy, has real devastating consequences for people on the ground. Kelly Clements from the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, she visited the border region in Chad.
Chad's hosting 1.5 million refugees already. An incredible burden.
Incredible. And Clements laid out some truly harrowing facts. 87% of the refugees arriving are women and children.
87%.
And maybe the most shocking statistic.
Yeah.
She stated that upwards of 70% of the women and girls have been subjected to sexual violence.
70%? That's hard to even process.
And the aid needed to help them, the medical support, the psychosocial support, just not there in the quantities required.
Because of funding.
Explicitly. Clements said contributions from key Western governments, the U.S., Germany, UK, France, Canada, have been, quote, dismal.
Dismal. So the apathy Fletcher talked about translates directly into underfunded aid programs.
Exactly. The essential support systems are critically failing these 12 million displaced people.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Still in conflict zones, but looking at a different kind of issue. The legal ambiguities around demolitions during ceasefires, specifically Gaza.
Right. The reports indicate Israel has destroyed over 1,500 buildings since the ceasefire began.
Okay, so what's the justification given?
The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, they state it's necessary to dismantle terror infrastructure, things like tunnels. They point to point 13 of the peace plan, which does talk about destroying offensive infrastructure.
And internally.
Sources within the IDF apparently believe Hamas won't stick to the next stage of the peace deal. So they argue they need to prepare the space for the continuation of the fighting near what's called the Yellow Line.
But analysts are pushing back hard on this.
Yeah, arguing it might violate the laws of war. Those laws are pretty strict. You can't destroy civilian property unless it's absolutely necessary by military operations.
And the key words there are absolutely necessary and military operations. How does that square with the ceasefire being technically in effect?
That's precisely the dispute. Does preparing for potential future fighting meet that incredibly high bar of absolute necessity right now during a supposed pause? Experts really question that.
So it hinges entirely on interpreting military necessity versus the protection civilians and their property should have, especially during a ceasefire.
It's a really dangerous gray area, a potential precedent.
That tension, that gap between, stated rules or agreements and the actions actually taken on the ground, it leads us right into our third theme, institutional integrity.
How major institutions handle accountability, truth, even history itself.
Let's start with the BBC. There was significant fallout from what's being called the speech edit row.
Right. A major controversy over the reported alteration of a political speech in a BBC broadcast. It led to huge internal pressure.
And ultimately the resignations of both the Director General, Tim Davie, and the head of news, Deborah Turnus. Big news.
Huge. And the timing, as you mentioned, is incredibly sensitive.
Because their foundational document, the Royal Charter, which governs how the BBC operates, how it's funded, is up for renewal at the end of 2027.
Exactly. So when the UK's Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, calls the BBC a national institution.
Is that a defense? Or is it sort of a warning, like, you're important, so get your house in order?
It feels like both, doesn't it? She holds political sway over that charter renewal. The government can absolutely leverage this internal turmoil. Davie was urging staff to fight the negative narrative, to push for changes or tighter scrutiny on impartiality.
And it's already having political consequences.
Yeah, the Reform UK party pulled their cooperation from a planned BBC documentary about their rise, specifically citing this row. So the damage is tangible. It's affecting relationships right now.
Okay, shifting from media integrity to historical integrity. Let's go to Austria. The parliament there recently hosted something called the Dinghofer Symposium.
And this event honored Franz Dinghofer. He was Austria's vice-chancellor back in the 1920s. But he was also a self-proclaimed radical antisemite, and later joined the Nazi Party.
Wow. So the parliament is hosting an event honoring someone with that history.
That's right. And it sparked protests, about 200 people demonstrating against it. They called it historical revisionism, especially since Austria had just commemorated the victims of the 1938 pogroms days earlier.
The timing seems particularly jarring.
Extremely. Yet, the parliamentary speaker, Walter Rosenkranz, who's from the far-right FBO party, he defended the event.
How?
He argued it was possible to, quote, see the positive aspects of Dinghofer's career despite his, quote, dark sides.
So a deliberate attempt to compartmentalize or downplay the anti-Semitism and Nazi affiliation.
It really highlights this ongoing struggle within institutions over how to deal with problematic historical figures, especially when current political forces have an interest in rehabilitating or reframing that past.
Okay, and this idea of institutions curating reality. Let's take it to the digital space now, Google Maps.
This is fascinating. How Google Maps displays the border between Western Sahara and Morocco actually changes depending on where you, the user, are located.
How so?
If you're looking at the map from outside Morocco, you see Western Sahara clearly labeled, and there's a dotted line indicating its disputed status. It's largely controlled by Morocco, but claimed by the Polisario Front, which is backed by Algeria. Standard practice for disputed territories.
Okay, but if you're in Morocco,
If you access Google Maps from within Morocco, that dotted line disappears. And the label Western Sahara is gone too. It just looks like undisputed Moroccan territory.
so Google is effectively showing two different maps depending on the user's location.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Google says this isn't new. It follows their long-standing policy for handling disputed regions, basically, reflecting the local reality or legal position where appropriate.
But the implication for you, the user, is significant, right?
Absolutely. It means a massive tech platform is tailoring geographic reality based on national claims.
Mm.
It shows how our digital view of the world can be actively shaped by geopolitics. The map becomes, in a way, a reflection of political assertion, not just neutral geography.
Blurring the line between map and manifesto, as one source put it. Okay, we've covered a lot of heavy ground, environmental threats, conflict, institutional crises.
Yeah, definitely some heavy topics.
So let's end on something genuinely uplifting, a moment of pure innovation and, well, applied knowledge.
Let's talk about Jared Lapora. He's 16 years old.
16, and he co-authored a research paper.
Not just that, he presented his work at a major international robotics conference in China.
Incredible. And what did he build?
He built a fully functioning, complex robotic hand. Anthropomorphic, meaning human-like.
Okay.
Made entirely out of Lego Mindstorms parts.
Legos? Seriously. Like the toy bricks.
Exactly, with a Lego version of a research model called the Soft Hand A, which is usually 3D printed. His Lego hand has 2 motors, 4 fingers, and needed over 100 bearings to work properly.
That sounds incredibly complex just using standard Lego parts. He must have had to figure out a lot of workarounds.
Totally. Things like routing the tendons around rotating bearings, compensating for the lack of internal springs that the original design uses. These are real engineering challenges.
But why do it with Legos? What was the point?
That's the brilliant part. It was educational. His goal was to show that you can understand and replicate professional robotic mechanisms, complex stuff like kinematics and tendon routing, using simple, accessible materials.
So democratizing robotics knowledge in a way.
Exactly. Proving you don't need a fancy lab. You need curiosity, ingenuity, and maybe a big box of Legos.
How did it perform compared to the original?
Tests showed it was a bit slower than the 3D printed Soft Hand A. But Jared's point wasn't really about matching performance specs.
It was about the learning process.
Right. He argues that actually building something like this is a great way to learn about robotics. He emphasized that accessible tools and hands-on building are key for his generation, the future engineers. It's pretty inspiring.
It really is a fantastic example of ingenuity. Okay, so let's try and tie this all together. We've journeyed quite a distance.
We really have, from that desperate, quiet fight to save 11th century manuscripts in Chinguetti.
To knowledge being built from scratch, literally, with a toolkit by a teenager.
And in between, we saw these high-stakes battles over truth and accountability at the BBC, the horrifying human cost of global indifference in Sudan.
The way history is contested in Austria, the way digital borders shift on Google Maps.
So if you step back, what's the common thread? I think it's this global struggle over resources, over narratives, over what gets seen and valued.
Right. If physical heritage like Chinguetti or essential humanitarian aid for Sudan are chronically underfunded,
While at the same time, our digital reality, like those maps, is being actively curated based on political claims.
it shapes the entire context for how we even understand these global challenges, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Think about the frustration we sometimes see, like with climate activists protesting at big conferences like COP30.
Yeah, pointing out the massive resources poured into the venue, the logistics, the security.
While elsewhere, there's this desperate need for funding for refugees, for preserving ancient knowledge, for basic health and education.
So the question becomes, how does this constant fight over tangible space, the library, the refugee camp, the conference center, and over informational space, what the news reports, what the map shows, how does that struggle ultimately shape our collective ability to prioritize and find real solutions to the huge problems we face?
That tension between what we claim to value, what we're actually shown, and where the resources truly flow, that feels like the critical point to carry forward from today's deep dive.
A lot to think about there. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this gives you some useful context to explore these crucial topics further.